Hi, I'm Morgan. They always told me blood is thicker than water. So I co-signed on my sister's loan applications, offered my spotless credit history, and trusted her with my financial information. Because family supports each other. They said, she deserved her chance at happiness. But while I was working overtime to keep my own bills paid, she was forging my signature on mortgage documents. And when the bank called me about missed payments on a house I never bought, my family said I should just help her out. After all, that's what sisters do. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The notification chimed on my phone at 6:42 a.m., just as steam from my first cup of coffee curled into the air of my small apartment kitchen. The message preview showed only, urgent, payment overdue, final notice. I tapped it open, assuming it was a mistake. My credit score was 812. I'd never missed a payment on anything in my life. My heart stopped when I saw the amount, $3,876. 42. Monthly mortgage payment. Property address, 1422 Lakeside Drive. I didn't own a house on Lakeside Drive. I'd never even been to Lakeside Drive. But I knew someone who had been talking about her dream home there for years. My sister, Elise. I set my coffee down slowly, watching the dark liquid ripple as my hand trembled. I needed to stay calm. There had to be a logical explanation. I tapped my sister's name in my contacts and waited as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. Hey, it's Elise. Leave a message, or better yet, text me like a normal person. Her cheerful voice felt like sandpaper against my rising anxiety. I texted her instead. Call me ASAP. It's important. The morning sun slanted through my kitchen blinds, casting stripes across the counter where I'd spread out my budget planner. I was saving for my own place, a modest condo closer to the architectural firm where I'd worked for the past 7 years. Nothing fancy, just something that was mine. At 34, I was tired of renting, tired of asking permission to paint walls or hang pictures. I'd been meticulously tracking every expense, putting aside what I could. $52,780 so far. Not enough for anything in Seattle's market, but getting closer each month. My phone rang, startling me. Not Elise, but my mother. Morgan, honey, how are you? Did you hear the news? Her voice had that breathless quality it always took on when she was excited about something Elise had done. What news? I asked carefully, my stomach tightening. Elise and Connor closed on their house. That beautiful craftsman on Lakeside she's been dreaming about for years. They're moving in this weekend. We're all heading over to help. You'll be there, right? The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the counter. Mom, I just got a notice about a missed mortgage payment. For a house on Lakeside Drive. There was a pause. Too long to be confusion, too short to be innocence. Oh, she said finally. Well, you know how it is with these automated systems. Probably just a mix-up. Elise mentioned something about putting your name on some paperwork temporarily. A formality, really. A formality? My voice sounded far away, even to my own ears. What kind of formality involves my name on a mortgage I didn't sign for? Morgan, don't overreact. You know your sister and Connor have been through so much trying to get this house. Their credit took a hit after Connor's business venture didn't work out, and with the baby coming. The baby, of course. Elise had announced her pregnancy 3 months ago, and since then, everything had centered around giving my future, niece or nephew, the perfect life, the perfect home, the perfect start. I need to speak with Elise, I said, cutting my mother off mid-sentence. She's very busy with the move, Morgan. Can't this wait? You don't want to stress her out in her condition. As if pregnancy was a terminal illness rather than something women had been managing since the beginning of time. I closed my eyes, counting slowly to 10 the way my therapist had taught me. Mom, someone put my name on a mortgage without my knowledge. That's identity theft. It's a federal crime. Don't be so dramatic. It's Elise, for heaven's sake. Your sister. She'd never do anything to hurt you. But even as she said it, I could hear the slight waver in her voice. She knew. She had always known how Elise operated, always made excuses, always expected me to do the same. I have to go, I said, and ended the call before she could respond. I worked from home that day, unable to focus on the sustainable building designs that usually captivated my attention. Instead, I pulled my credit report, made calls to the bank, and tried Elise's number every hour. By evening, I had confirmation of what I already suspected. A mortgage for $875,000 had been opened in my name 3 weeks ago. The paperwork had my signature, or something close enough to fool a busy loan officer. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At 7:38 p.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Elise standing there, 7 months pregnant, wearing a flowing maternity dress and a practiced expression of apologetic innocence. "I was going to tell you," she said, stepping past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Once everything was settled. "Settled?" I repeated, closing the door slowly. "You mean once the house was in your name and the fraud was complete?" She sank onto my couch with a dramatic sigh, one hand resting on her rounded stomach. "It's not fraud when it's family, Morgan. It's just creative problem solving." I remained standing, arms crossed. "The bank called it fraud. They're launching an investigation." For the first time, a flicker of real concern crossed her face. "You didn't confirm anything, did you? Tell them it was a misunderstanding, that you approved it." "Why would I do that, Elise? Why would I lie to cover up a crime you committed? Against me?" "Because I'm your sister." Her voice rose indignant. "Because I'm having a baby and we needed a house in a good school district. Because Connor and I have been through hell trying to rebuild after his startup failed. Because you've always been the responsible one with the perfect credit score and the stable job. So that makes me what? Your personal financial resource? An identity you can borrow when yours isn't good enough?" She softened her expression, leaning forward. This was familiar territory, Elise's ability to transform from entitled to vulnerable in seconds. "You know I'd do the same for you if the situations were reversed. Family supports family, Morgan. Mom and Dad agree with me. They think you're being rigid about this." Of course they did. In the story of our family, Elise was always the protagonist, creative, charismatic, in need of support, while I was cast as the sensible sidekick, expected to help advance her plot. "How did you even get my information? My signature?" She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Remember when you helped me with the rental application last year? I kept copies of everything. And the signature. Well, I've been practicing yours since we were kids. Remember how I used to sign your report cards when Mom and Dad were out of town?" I did remember. I'd thought it was a joke, a silly teenage prank, not preparation for felony fraud. "You need to fix this," I said firmly. "Call the bank tomorrow. Tell them the truth. We'll figure out a payment plan, something to make this right." Elise's face hardened. "I can't do that. We'd lose the house. My baby deserves a safe place to grow up, with good schools and a yard to play in." "And my future? My credit? The condo I've been saving for? What do I deserve, Elise?" "You've always been fine on your own," she said dismissively. "You don't need anyone. I have Connor and the baby to think about." I stared at her, this person I'd grown up with, shared a bathroom with, protected from bullies and boyfriends alike. When had she become someone who could hurt me so casually? Or had she always been this person, and I'd just refused to see it? You need to leave, I said quietly. Morgan, be reasonable. Get out of my apartment, Elise. Now. She gathered her designer purse, her expression shifting from frustration to calculated hurt. I thought you'd understand. I really did. Wait until Mom and Dad hear about this. The threat was clear. They would take her side, as they always had. The golden child could do no wrong, even when what she'd done was objectively, legally wrong. After she left, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, trying to process what had happened. My phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from my parents, alternating between guilt trips and demands that I work this out with my sister. I turned it off and opened my laptop instead. I began to document everything. The notification from the bank, the credit report showing the new mortgage, the text, messages from Elise that all but admitted what she'd done. I created a folder labeled Evidence and saved it all there. Then I opened a new tab and searched for identity theft by family member and reporting mortgage fraud. The results were clear, if gut-wrenching. What Elise had done wasn't just morally wrong, it was a serious crime that could result in significant jail time, especially given the amount involved. I wasn't just protecting myself by reporting it. I was potentially saving her from even worse consequences down the line. Still, my finger hesitated over the Submit Report button on the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center website. This was Elise, my little sister who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, who was about to become a mother. But she was also the person who had stolen my identity, potentially ruined my credit, and showed no real remorse for any of it. I closed the laptop without submitting the report. I needed time to think, to weigh my options, to see if there was any way to resolve this that wouldn't destroy my sister's life, or mine. The next morning, I woke to a text from Connor, Elise's husband. We need to talk. Coffee at Westlake Park? 10 a.m. I agreed, curious about what he had to say. I'd always liked Connor, with his earnest demeanor and genuine affection for my sister. He'd seemed like a stabilizing influence on her, at least until his tech startup had failed last year, burning through their savings and apparently their credit scores as well. Westlake Park was quiet for a Saturday morning. I spotted Connor, sitting on a bench near the fountain, his shoulders hunched, looking nothing like the confident entrepreneur I'd known for the past 5 years. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat beside him. "I'm sorry about all this." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About the mortgage, about using your information. I thought we'd been approved based on my new job and the down payment help from her parents." "Her parents," I repeated. "You mean our parents?" He looked confused. "No, I mean Gary and Susan, Elise's parents." I felt like I'd been doused with the fountain water. "Connor, Gary, and Susan aren't Elise's parents. They're our parents. They're my parents, too." His confusion deepened. "That's not what Elise told me. She said you were her half-sister from her dad's previous marriage, that you and her parents had a strained relationship because of the divorce." The park seemed to spin around me. "Connor, Elise, and I have the same parents. We grew up in the same house. There was no divorce, no previous marriage. I don't know why she would tell you that." Connor's face went pale. "Oh my God," he whispered. "What else has she lied about?" That question opened a floodgate. For the next hour, Connor and I compared notes, unraveling a web of deception Elise had woven between us. She'd told him I was financially unstable and frequently borrowed money from her. She'd told me he was controlling their finances and refusing to let her help me. She'd apparently told our parents entirely different stories about both of us. "The mortgage broker," Connor said suddenly. "She handled all the paperwork, said it would be easier if she dealt with it while I focused on the new job. I signed everything she put in front of me. He looked up, horror dawning. I might have signed papers with your name on them, Morgan. I might be part of this fraud without knowing it. I felt a surge of sympathy for him. Connor might be guilty of naivete, but he clearly hadn't intended to participate in identity theft. We need to fix this, I said. All of it, starting with the mortgage. He nodded grimly. I'll call the bank first thing Monday. And Morgan, you should know that the missed payment notification you got, that wasn't the first. The mortgage is already 2 months behind. But you just closed on the house. How is it already in arrears? Connor's expression was pained. Elise told me she was handling the payments, that they were coming out of her personal account automatically. What personal account? As far as I knew, Elise hadn't worked in over a year, claiming the pregnancy made it too difficult to continue her freelance graphic design business. I don't know, Connor admitted, but I'm going to find out. We parted with a plan to meet again on Monday after Connor had spoken with the bank. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. My father. Morgan, this has gone too far, he said, without preamble. Your sister is in tears. She could lose her house because you're being stubborn. I stopped walking. Dad, do you even know what's happening here? Elise committed identity theft. She forged my signature on mortgage documents for a house I didn't even know she was buying. She made a mistake, he said dismissively. People make mistakes, Morgan, especially when they're pregnant and hormonal. You need to show some compassion. Compassion? Dad, this isn't about forgetting to return a borrowed sweater. This is a felony that could impact my entire financial future. He sighed. That familiar sound of disappointment I'd heard so many times growing up. Usually when I'd refused to go along with one of Elise's schemes or failed to drop my own plans to accommodate hers. We're family, he said, as if that explained, and excused everything. Family forgives. Family helps each other through tough times. Yes, family helps, I agreed. But family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't commit fraud against each other. That's a very cold way of looking at things, Morgan. Very transactional. Your sister needs you right now. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by the familiar dynamic. Dad, I'm going to fix this, but not in the way you think, not by letting Elise off the hook again. I ended the call before he could respond and continued to my car. As I drove home, I thought about family, about the narratives we create and the roles we assign, about how Elise had always been the one who needed saving, and I had always been the one expected to do the saving, but not this time. This time, I would save myself first. Back at my apartment, I reopened my laptop and clicked Submit on the FBI report I'd started the night before. Then I called a lawyer who specialized in identity theft. The receptionist offered me an appointment on Tuesday. I need something. Sooner, I said. This is an emergency. The attorney has a cancellation on Monday at 8 a.m., she offered. I'll take it. After setting the appointment, I did something I'd never done before. I blocked my parents' numbers. I silenced notifications from Elise. I ordered delivery instead of cooking, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat on my small balcony watching the Seattle skyline as dusk fell. For the first time since receiving that mortgage notification, I felt like I could breathe. I had a plan. I was taking action. I was putting myself first. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Is this Morgan Chen? A woman's voice asked when I picked up. Yes, who's calling? This is Detective Harmon with the Financial Crimes Unit. We've received some concerning alerts about activity in your name, and I'd like to ask you a few questions. I sat up straighter. Someone filed a police report? The bank did, Ms. Chen. Whenever there's suspected mortgage fraud over a certain dollar amount, it triggers an automatic notification to our department. The wine suddenly tasted sour in my mouth. This was real. This was happening. And it was moving faster than I'd anticipated. "I'd be happy to answer your questions," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can you come to the station tomorrow? Say, 2 p.m.? Tomorrow was Sunday. I had planned to use the day to prepare for my legal consultation on Monday, but this seemed more urgent. "I'll be there," I promised. After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness, thinking about consequences, about choices, about the road ahead. Elise had stolen my identity to buy her dream house. By this time tomorrow, I would set in motion events that might cost her everything: the house, her freedom, her comfortable life. I thought I would feel guilty, conflicted, torn. Instead, I felt resolved, calm, certain. For too long, I had been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who sacrificed for others, the one whose needs came last. No more. I finished my wine and went inside, closing the balcony door firmly behind me. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. But for tonight, in this moment, I was taking back control of my story. As dawn broke over the Seattle skyline, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold, I was already awake. Sleep had been elusive, my mind racing with preparations for the day ahead. I'd spent hours documenting everything I could remember about Elise's access to my personal information, every strange comment or inconsistency in her stories over the past year. The pattern, once I looked for it, was alarmingly clear. The jokes about how much easier life would be with my credit score. The mail that went missing from my apartment when she visited. The sudden interest in my online banking setup, ostensibly to help set up her own accounts, just like yours. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing a structured blazer and tailored pants, armor for the battle ahead. As I applied minimal makeup, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Connor, using work phone. We need to talk before you meet with anyone." Elise withdrew $50K from our joint account this morning. She's gone. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before it fully registered. Elise had run, with $50,000, leaving Connor, her mortgage fraud, and her soon-to-be-born child's father behind. I texted back, "Where would she go?" His response came quickly. "No idea. She's not answering. Parents aren't either." A cold certainty settled in my stomach. They knew. My parents knew exactly where Elise was, and they were helping her evade consequences. Again. I arrived at the police station 20 minutes early, clutching a folder of documentation and a travel mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Detective Harmon was a compact woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Chen," she said, leading me to a small interview room. "I understand this must be difficult." "Less difficult than you might think," I replied, opening my folder. "I've already prepared a statement about what happened." Her eyebrows rose slightly as I handed her the typed pages. "That's unusually thorough." "I'm an architect," I explained. "Details matter in my line of work." She nodded, scanning the document. "And you're willing to press charges, even though this is your sister?" "Especially because it's my sister," I said firmly. She knew exactly what she was doing and who she was hurting. Detective Harmon studied me for a moment, then nodded. "We'll need you to sign some formal statements, and you'll likely need to testify if this goes to trial." "I understand." "You should also know that we received a call this morning from a Connor Walsh. He identified himself as your sister's husband and wanted to turn himself in as a potential accomplice." I hadn't expected that. Connor didn't know what Elise was doing. She lied to him, too. "So, he claimed, we'll need to investigate his involvement regardless." She paused. "He also reported that your sister has disappeared with a significant amount of money. We've issued a bolo for her vehicle." A be on the lookout alert. This was escalating quickly, becoming more real with each passing moment. I thought of Elise, 7 months pregnant, running from the law. What was she thinking? As if reading my thoughts, Detective Harmon added, "Given her condition, we're approaching this with appropriate caution. Our priority is to locate her safely." I nodded, grateful for the detective's understanding. "Is there anywhere your sister might go? Friends, relatives, vacation spots?" I thought about it. My parents have a cabin on Lake Chelan. It's isolated. About 3 hours from here. They used to take us there as kids. Detective Harmon made a note. "We'll check it out. In the meantime, I recommend you secure all your accounts and documents. Change passwords, request credit freezes, the works." "Already done," I said. She looked up, a hint of approval in her expression. "You're handling this remarkably well, Ms. Chen." Was I? It didn't feel like handling it well. It felt like survival mode, like moving through deep water, focused only on the next stroke, the next breath. "I've had practice," I said simply. After finishing at the police station, I met Connor at a small coffee shop nearby. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his normally neat appearance rumpled, eyes bloodshot. "They took my statement," he said before I could ask. "I'm cooperating fully. They don't think I'll face charges, but nothing's certain yet." I nodded, relieved for his sake. "Any word from Elise?" He shook his head. "Nothing. But your parents finally called me back. They're disappointed in my disloyalty. Said I should have protected Elise instead of throwing her to the wolves." The familiar refrain made my jaw clench. They've been enabling her behavior our entire lives. They're not going to stop now. "What happens to the house?" Connor asked, staring into his untouched coffee. "The bank will foreclose eventually," I said. "But first, they'll try to collect from me since my name is on the mortgage." "I'll sign whatever you need to clear your name," he promised. "And I'll make payments for as long as I can. Try to minimize the damage to your credit." His offer surprised me. In the midst of his own crisis, pregnant wife missing, potential criminal charges, financial ruin, he was thinking about my credit score. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "But you should focus on yourself right now. And the baby." His face crumpled at the mention of his child. What kind of mother runs away at 7 months pregnant? What kind of person does that? I had no answer for him. I'd been asking myself similar questions about what kind of sister steals her siblings. Identity. What kind of parents support such behavior? What kind of family values loyalty to a fault over basic honesty and respect? "I never saw it," Connor said almost to himself. "All the lies, the manipulation. I thought she was just spirited, impulsive. I thought it was charming." I recognized the wounded confusion in his eyes. I'd felt it myself, countless times, after discovering yet another of Elise's deceptions, or enduring another parental lecture about being more understanding of my sister's unique needs. "It's not your fault," I told him. "Elise has had a lifetime of practice." We sat in silence for a moment, two people connected by someone who had betrayed us both. "What now?" Connor finally asked. "Now we wait," I said. "For the police to find Elise, for the legal system to work, for whatever comes next." But as it turned out, we didn't have to wait long at all. My phone rang at 5:17 a.m. the next morning. Detective Harmon's number. "We found your sister," she said without preamble. She was attempting to cross into Canada at a remote border crossing. The Border Patrol detained her when her ID didn't match the name she gave. I sat up in bed, fully awake now. "Is she okay?" "Physically, yes. We've arranged for her to be checked at a local hospital as a precaution, given her pregnancy. She's being transported back to Seattle now. She'll be arraigned this afternoon." My sister, in handcuffs. My sister, in a courtroom. My sister facing criminal charges. "Thanks," You for letting me know, I managed. There's one more thing, Detective Harmon added. We found evidence in her possession that suggests this isn't the first time she's misused someone's identity. There were credit cards in 3 different names in her wallet, along with corresponding identification documents. The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. 3 different names? Yes. We're still investigating, but it appears your sister has been quite busy. After hanging up, I sat motionless on the edge of my bed. The scope of Elise's deception was still expanding, revealing depths I hadn't imagined. Who were these? Other people. Were they also victims of her charm, her practiced vulnerability, her skill at making others feel responsible for her happiness? I showered and dressed mechanically, my mind racing. The arraignment was scheduled for 2 p.m. Did I want to be there? Did I need to see her face when she realized the game was truly over? My phone buzzed with a text from Connor. Just heard from Detective. Are you going to the arraignment? I hadn't decided yet. Part of me wanted to witness this moment of accountability. Another part wanted to maintain the distance I'd finally established, to protect the boundaries I was just learning to enforce. I don't know, I replied honestly. I'll be there, he texted back. Not for her, for myself, for closure. Closure. Was that what I needed too? Or had I already found it in the moment I'd decided to value myself enough to press charges, to refuse to be a victim any longer? I made my decision. I'll meet you there. The courthouse was the imposing structure of granite and glass in downtown Seattle. I arrived early, taking a seat in the back of the courtroom. Connor slipped in beside me just before the proceedings. Began, his face grim but resolved. When they brought Elise in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the confident glow, the perfect makeup, the carefully curated appearance of someone who had everything under control. In its place was a woman in an orange jumpsuit, hair pulled back severely, eyes darting nervously around the room. Those eyes found mine, and for a moment, the sister I knew, or thought I knew, seemed to surface. She mouthed something that might have been "help me" or "I'm sorry." I couldn't tell which, and perhaps it didn't matter. Both were too little, too late. The charges were read: identity theft, mortgage fraud, grand larceny, attempted flight to avoid prosecution. The judge denied bail, citing flight risk. Elise's court-appointed attorney looked overwhelmed, shuffling papers and whispering urgently to his client. Connor remained stone-faced throughout. When Elise was led away, he stood. I need some air, he said quietly. I nodded, understanding, completely. Outside, the Seattle rain had started, a gentle mist that blurred the edges of buildings and softened the harsh lines of the city. Connor and I stood under the courthouse overhang, watching people hurry past with umbrellas and raincoats. What happens now? He asked, echoing his question from the coffee shop. This time, I had more of an answer. She'll go to trial, or more likely take a plea deal. Either way, there will be consequences. Probably jail time. Definitely restitution. And us? What happens to us now? I glanced at him, surprised by the question. We move forward. We rebuild. We learn from this. He nodded slowly. The baby is due in 2 months. I've already filed for full custody, given the circumstances. You'll be a good father, I said and meant it. And you? He asked. What will you be to this child? After everything Elise has done? I hadn't thought that far ahead. The baby, my niece or nephew, was an innocent in all this. Yet the thought of maintaining a connection to Elise, even through her child, was complicated. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I won't punish a child for their mother's actions. Connor seemed satisfied with that answer. For what it's worth, Morgan, I'm sorry. For all of it. For not seeing what was happening. For being part of something that hurt you. You were deceived too, I reminded him. We both were. We parted ways with a promise to stay in touch about the legal proceedings. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. My mother. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? How could you? She demanded, her voice raw with emotion. How could you do this to your own sister? For a moment, the familiar guilt threatened to surface. The ingrained response to apologize, to make peace, to take responsibility for everyone else's feelings. But I pushed it away. I didn't do anything to Elise, I said calmly. She did this to herself, and to me, and to Connor, and apparently to at least 3 other people whose identities she stole. She made mistakes, my mother insisted. Everyone makes mistakes. Mom, this wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated series of crimes. She's going to have a baby in prison because of you. I took a deep breath. No, she's facing consequences for her actions. And if she gives birth in custody, that's because of choices she made, not because of me. I don't even know who you are anymore, my mother said, her voice breaking. My own daughter, turning against family this way. That's the thing, Mom. I am your daughter too. I always have been. But you and Dad never seemed to remember that when it came to choosing between me and Elise. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths, with years of favoritism and enabling, with the weight of family dynamics too long unchallenged. We love you both, she said finally, but the words rang hollow. Love without respect isn't love, Mom. It's ownership. It's control. It's a lot of things, but it isn't love. I ended the call before she could respond, before the conversation could circle back to how I was failing the family by refusing to sacrifice myself one more time. That evening, alone in my apartment, I opened a bottle of wine and stepped out, onto my small balcony. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean, the lights reflecting off wet pavement like scattered stars. I thought about family, about how we're taught that blood is thicker than water, that loyalty to family trumps all other considerations, even loyalty to ourselves, about how those beliefs can become weapons used against us, binding us to people who harm us under the guise of love. My sister had stolen my identity to buy her dream house. The bank had called me. And by dawn, she had lost everything: her freedom, her husband's trust, her carefully constructed facade of the perfect life. But me? I hadn't lost. I had found something. Myself. My voice. My boundaries. My worth. I raised my glass to the city. Lights, to new beginnings, to the future stretching out before me. Uncertain, perhaps, but undeniably mine. The first week after discovering the mortgage fraud was a blur of legal consultations, bank meetings, and sleepless nights. I moved through each day on autopilot, design meetings at work, calls with the fraud department during lunch breaks, evenings spent combing through financial records looking for other signs of identity theft. My normally tidy apartment became a war room of sorts, with papers spread across every surface, sticky notes marking suspicious transactions, a timeline growing along one wall. I hadn't heard from Elise since she'd stormed out of my apartment. My parents continued their campaign of guilt and manipulation through voicemails I refused to return. Only Connor kept in touch, providing updates on the house situation and his own growing realization of how thoroughly he'd been deceived. She told me your parents gave us the down payment as a gift, he texted one evening. Just found bank records showing she transferred it from an account I've never seen before. Each new revelation should have shocked me, but instead they settled into a familiar pattern. The sister I thought I knew was dissolving before my eyes, replaced by someone calculating, someone who viewed relationships as transactions and people as resources to be used. On the 8th day, while sorting through a stack of mail that had accumulated during my distraction, I found something odd: a credit card statement for an account I didn't recognize. The name on the envelope was mine, but the address was listed as 1422 Lakeside Drive, Elise's dream house. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a statement showing over $42,000 in charges. Furniture stores, high-end electronics, a luxury baby boutique, even a private birth doula service that cost more than my monthly rent. All charged to a platinum card in my name, all within the past month. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I grabbed the edge of my kitchen counter, breathing deeply until the dizziness passed. This wasn't just about a mortgage anymore. This was systematic identity theft on a scale I hadn't imagined. How many other accounts had she opened? How deep did this deception go? I called the credit card company immediately. After nearly an hour of security questions and explanations, they confirmed what I already knew. The account had been opened 3 months ago, with my social security number and a digital signature that matched mine closely enough to pass their verification system. "We can flag this as fraudulent," the representative said, "but you'll need to file a police report for us to fully investigate." I already had an appointment with Detective Harmon the next day. I added this new discovery to my growing file of evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, mind racing with questions that had no answers. How long had Elise been planning this? Had our entire relationship been a setup for this betrayal? Was there anything real between us at all? Around 3 a.m., desperate for some sense of normalcy, I opened Instagram, something I'd been avoiding since this nightmare began. The algorithm, unaware of my family crisis, immediately served me a post from my cousin Layla, a photo of Elise at what appeared to be a baby shower, surrounded by gifts, beaming in a floral maternity dress. The caption read, "Celebrating the most deserving mom to be. Elise Walsh has overcome so much to create this beautiful life for her growing family. So inspired by your strength. Blessed Chatter baby shower, Chak dream home." I zoomed in on the image, studying the details. The shower was held at the Lakeside house, my house according to the fraudulent mortgage. Behind Elise, I could see a gleaming kitchen with high-end appliances, marble countertops, and custom cabinetry. The living room featured an enormous sectional sofa I recognized from the credit card statement, $8,200 at Seattle's most exclusive furniture showroom. My thumb hovered over the comment button. What would I even say? That's all purchased with stolen money and identity fraud? Hope you enjoy the furniture bought with my ruined credit? Instead, I took screenshots, saving them to my evidence folder, and then did something I'd never done before. I blocked Elise. And then, one by one, I blocked my parents, my cousins, every family member who had participated in the shower, who had celebrated this elaborate fraud as if it were a fairy tale coming true. It felt both terrible and liberating, like cutting away diseased tissue, painful, but necessary for healing. The next morning, I met with Detective Harmon at the precinct, handing over the credit card statement and the screenshots from social media. "This is helpful," she said, adding them to a file that was growing as thick as my own. "It establishes a pattern of deliberate, ongoing fraud rather than a one-time impulsive action." "Is there any way to know how many accounts she's opened in my name?" I asked. "We've subpoenaed her financial records and devices. That should give us a clearer picture." She hesitated. "But you should prepare yourself. In cases like this, we often find that the fraud is more extensive than initially thought." More extensive. The words echoed in my head as I left the station. How much worse could it get? I was about to find out. That afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something, instinct, perhaps, made me answer. "Is this Morgan Chen?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Vivian Taylor. You don't know me, but I think we have a mutual problem." I tensed. "What kind of problem?" "Elise Walsh," she said, and my heart skipped. "I believe she's been using my identity as well as yours. I found your name in some paperwork I discovered, and I've been trying to track you down. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral, territory where we could talk privately. I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner where I could see the door. When a slender woman with cropped silver hair and sharp eyes walked in, scanning the room with the same cautious intensity I'd been feeling for days, I knew it was Vivian. She sat across from me, ordered a black coffee, and got straight to the point. I was Elise's supervisor at Meridian Design 3 years ago, she explained. She worked in our graphic design department for about 8 months before she was fired for expense account irregularities. I hadn't known Elise was fired. She'd told everyone she left to focus on freelance work. After she left, things seemed fine, Vivian continued. Until last month, when I started getting collection calls for a car loan I never took out. A $78,000 luxury SUV, purchased in my name 6 months ago. My stomach dropped. Let me guess. It's the same car Elise drives. Vivian nodded grimly. A white Audi Q7. I've seen her parking it outside that house on Lakeside Drive. We spent the next 2 hours comparing notes, building a timeline of Elise's activities that was as impressive in its audacity as it was horrifying in its implications. Vivian had already filed police reports and was working with a lawyer specializing in identity theft. She'd come further in her process than I had, having already obtained court orders freezing several fraudulent accounts. The thing that bothers me most, Vivian said as we prepared to leave, is how easy it was for her. She had access to my personnel file as an employee, just like she had access to your personal information as your sister. She exploited relationships and trust like they were just tools. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Have you found anyone else she's done this to? Not yet, but I'm looking. This level of fraud rarely stops at 2 victims. We exchanged contact information and promised to keep each other updated. As I watched Vivian walk away, I felt strangely comforted. I wasn't alone in this. Elise's betrayal wasn't a reflection on me or some failure in our relationship. It was a pattern, a calculated series of crimes committed by someone who saw other people as nothing more than resources to be exploited. The next day, I received a text from Connor. Can you meet me at the house? Found something you need to see? I hesitated. I hadn't been to the Lakeside house yet, hadn't seen in person the property purchased in my name without my knowledge. Part of me wanted to pretend it didn't exist. But Connor's message sounded urgent, and despite everything, I still trusted him. The house was even more impressive in person than it had appeared in the social media photos, a restored craftsman, with a deep front porch, meticulous landscaping, and a view of Lake Washington from the upper windows. In another life, under different circumstances, I might have admired it as an architectural achievement. Now it just looked like the physical manifestation of my sister's betrayal. Connor met me at the door, looking grim. Thanks for coming. It's in the home office. I followed him through the house, trying not to notice the expensive furniture, the custom finishes, the carefully curated decor that screamed Elise's taste. The home office was at the back of the house, a sunny room, with built-in bookshelves and a large desk overlooking the garden. I was looking for our insurance documents, Connor explained, and I found this. He opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out a sleek laptop I didn't recognize. It's password protected, but she used the same password for everything. Our wedding anniversary. His voice caught slightly on the word wedding, and I felt a pang of sympathy for him. He'd been betrayed even more deeply than I had. He entered the password, and the screen came to life. Look at this, he said, opening a folder labeled Financial Freedom Project. Inside were dozens of subfolders, each labeled with a name. Mine was there. So was Vivian's. But there were others. At least 10 more names I didn't recognize. What is this? I whispered, though I already knew. From what I can tell, it's her system, Connor said. Each folder contains identity information, account numbers, passwords, even signature samples for the person it's named after. My folder contained scans of my driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, and passport. There were screenshots of my online banking login page, my credit card accounts, my retirement fund. There were practice sheets where Elise had clearly been perfecting my signature. "How did she get all this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Connor looked away. "Some of it was probably from your parents' house, the important documents people keep in safe deposit boxes or home safes. Some she might have gotten from your mail or your apartment when she visited, and some—" "Some what?" He hesitated. "Some she might have gotten from me. She asked me to run credit checks on several people last year, said it was for a financial literacy workshop she was developing. I work in banking, Morgan. I had access. I didn't think." He trailed off, the weight of his unwitting complicity heavy in the air between us. "You didn't know," I said finally. "She lied to everyone." We spent the next hour documenting everything on the laptop, taking photos of the screen, making notes of names to pass along to Detective Harmon. According to the timestamps on the files, Elise had been collecting this information for over 2 years, long before the mortgage fraud, long before the credit cards, long before she was even pregnant. This wasn't opportunistic. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated, long-term planning. As we finished, Connor closed the laptop with a sigh. "There's something else you should know. Your parents have been here almost every day since you found out about the mortgage. They helped her move furniture in, set up the nursery. They knew about all of this, Morgan." I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a physical blow. They knew she was using my identity? I don't know if they knew the specifics, but they definitely knew the house was purchased under circumstances that weren't normal. Your father made a joke about Elise being creative with the financing. Creative. As if identity theft and mortgage fraud were just clever life hacks rather than felonies. I left the Lakeside house with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with the laptop full of evidence, and everything to do with the realization that my family, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, had been complicit in causing me harm. Back at my apartment, I found 3 voicemails from my mother, each more frantic than the last. "Morgan, please call us. We need to talk about this situation with your sister. Morgan, your father and I are very concerned about the police involvement. This is a family matter that should be handled privately. Morgan, if you continue with these accusations, you're going to destroy this family. Is that what you want? To tear apart everything we've built because you're jealous of your sister's success?" Jealous? The word landed like a slap. I wasn't jealous of Elise's success. Success built on fraud, on theft, on exploiting the trust of family and friends. I was angry. I was hurt. I was determined to see justice done. But jealous? No. I deleted the voicemails without responding and called Detective Harmon instead, arranging to bring in the new evidence we'd discovered. That night, unable to sleep again, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of Elise and me as children, as teenagers, as young adults. Birthdays, holidays, vacations. Moments I'd thought were genuine connections, shared, experiences that built our relationship. Had any of it been real? Had she always seen me as just another resource to exploit? Had I always been nothing more than a means to an end for her? I stopped on a photo from 5 years ago, Elise and me at my architecture firm's holiday party. I'd invited her as my +1 because I was new at the firm and nervous about going alone. In the picture, she had her arm around my waist, both of us smiling at the camera. But her other hand, the one I hadn't noticed until now, was reaching into my purse, which was open at my side. Had she been taking something? Or was it an innocent gesture captured at an unfortunate moment? I would never know. And that was perhaps the cruelest part of this whole ordeal. The way it poisoned every memory, casting doubt on every moment I'd thought we'd shared as sisters. The next morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. "You should check your mail today. V. Vivian." I didn't question how she knew something was coming in my mail. At this point, nothing would surprise me. Sure enough, when I opened my mailbox, there was a thick envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter explaining that they represented Gary and Susan Chen, my parents, in a matter concerning the property at 1422 Lakeside Drive. According to the letter, my parents were asserting that the down payment for the house, $175,000, had been a gift to Elise, given with the understanding that the property would be legally transferred to her name once temporary financing hurdles were overcome. They were seeking to protect their investment in the property regardless of any misunderstandings between Elise and myself. Misunderstandings. As if identity theft and mortgage fraud were on the same level as borrowing a sweater without asking. I read the letter 3 times, each reading stoking a fire of indignation that burned away any remaining doubt about what I needed to do. My parents weren't just enabling Elise's behavior. They were actively participating in it, trying to legitimize fraud under the guise of family financial support. I scanned the letter and sent it to my lawyer and to Detective Harmon, then sat down to draft a response. But the words wouldn't come. How do you explain to your own parents that their actions aren't just hurtful but criminal? That their support of one daughter has become active harm against another? Instead, I made a different kind of list. I titled it, "What I Deserve," and under it, I wrote, "To be treated with basic respect and honesty, to have my identity and finances, secure from theft, even by family, to set boundaries that protect me from harm, to expect consequences for those who violate my trust, regardless of their relationship to me, to rebuild my life on my terms without guilt or manipulation." I taped this list to my bathroom mirror, a daily reminder that what I was feeling, anger, hurt, determination, wasn't wrong or selfish. It was a natural, healthy response to violation and betrayal. Later that day, I met with my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Renata who specialized in identity theft cases and didn't mince words. "Your parents' letter is legally meaningless," she said after reviewing it. "They can't retroactively legitimize fraud by claiming it was part of some family financial arrangement, but it does tell us something important." "What's that?" "They're worried. They know Elise is in serious trouble, and they're trying to mitigate the damage. It also suggests they may have been more involved than we initially thought. We should look into their financial records as well." The suggestion that my parents might have been actively involved in the fraud, not just emotionally supportive of Elise, opened yet another painful possibility. How deep did this betrayal go? I left Renata's office with a list of next steps. File formal identity theft reports with all 3 credit bureaus, contact every financial institution where fraudulent accounts had been opened, prepare a victim impact statement for the eventual criminal case, and gather documentation for a civil suit against not just Elise, but potentially my parents as well. The scale of the task was overwhelming, but also clarifying. This wasn't just about a mortgage or credit cards anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my identity, my future from people who had treated them as resources to be exploited rather than boundaries to be respected. On my way home, I stopped at a local bookstore, seeking a moment of normalcy amid the chaos. As I browsed the architecture section, a title caught my eye. Rebuilding, Design Principles for Life After Loss. It wasn't an architecture book at all, but rather a guide to reconstructing one's life after trauma, using architectural principles as metaphors. I bought it without hesitation, along with a new journal. Not for documenting fraud this time, but for recording my own thoughts, feelings, and plans as I navigated this unexpected chapter of my life. That evening, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and my new book, my phone rang. Connor again. Elise came by the house today, he said without preamble. She was trying to take more things. Jewelry, electronics, the sonogram pictures. My heart raced. Did you call the police? I didn't have to. They were already watching the house. They took her in for questioning about an hour ago. The news should have brought relief, but instead, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Satisfaction that justice was finally catching up to Elise, sorrow for the sister I thought I had, concern for the baby who would be born into this mess. Are you okay? I asked Connor, suddenly aware that despite everything Elise had done, he was still her husband, still the father of her child. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said finally. I'm not okay, but I will be. We both will be. After we hung up, I opened my new journal to the first blank page. At the top, I wrote Day 1, then paused, considering what this was the first day of. Not the first day of discovering the fraud. That had been weeks ago. Not the first day of taking action. I'd been doing that all along. This was the first day of truly accepting what had happened and deciding to move forward anyway. The first day of rebuilding my life, not despite the betrayal, but with the wisdom gained from it. I began to write, not about Elise or my parents or the fraud, but about myself, about the person I wanted to be on the other side of this, about the boundaries I would establish, the trust I would be more careful with, the warning signs I would pay attention to next time, but also about the things I wouldn't change, my capacity for compassion, my willingness to help others, my belief in the possibility of genuine connection. I wouldn't let Elise's betrayal take those from me, wouldn't let this experience harden me into someone cold or cynical. As dusk fell over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. It was too soon for that and might always be. Not acceptance. What Elise had done was unacceptable by any measure. But something like resolve, like the first sturdy foundation stone laid for whatever would come next. My sister had stolen my identity to buy her dream house. The bank had called me. And yes, she would lose everything by dawn. Her freedom, her reputation, her carefully constructed facade of success. But I wouldn't lose. Not my true identity, which went far deeper than social security numbers and credit scores. Not my capacity for trust, though it would be more wisely given. Not my future, which remained mine to shape however I chose. The next day brought another unexpected development. A woman named Teresa Mendoza contacted me through the fraud victim support group I'd joined online. She had been Elise's roommate in college, and her identity had been the first one my sister had stolen nearly 12 years ago. I never pressed charges, Teresa told me over coffee. I was young, scared, and her parents, your parents, paid off the debts she'd racked up. In my name, they made me sign an NDA as part of the settlement. An NDA? I repeated, stunned. About identity theft committed by their daughter? Teresa nodded grimly. They were very concerned about her future. Said a criminal record would ruin her life. They never once asked about the impact on my life, my credit, my future. The pattern extended further back than I'd imagined. Elise hadn't suddenly become a person who would steal identities and commit fraud. She'd been that person for years, enabled and protected by our parents at every turn. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Aren't you worried about violating the NDA? Teresa's expression hardened. The NDA had a term limit of 10 years. It expired 2 years ago. And when I saw the news about Elise's arrest, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. There might be others like us out there, other victims who were silenced or paid off. The idea that there could be a trail of victims stretching back through years of my sister's life was both horrifying and illuminating. This wasn't about me. It wasn't even about Elise. Not really. It was about a pattern of behavior that had been allowed to continue and escalate because no one, not our parents, not previous victims, not the system, had held her accountable. Until now. I left my meeting with Teresa with a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just seeking justice for myself anymore. I was potentially breaking a cycle that had harmed others before me and would harm others after me if left unchecked. That afternoon, I received a call from Detective Harmon. "We've frozen all the accounts we could identify," she said, "and we've obtained warrants for your parents' financial records based on the evidence you and Connor provided." My parents? Despite my suspicions, hearing that they were now formally part of the investigation was jarring. "Yes, we have reason to believe they may have been actively participating in the fraud, not just providing emotional support to your sister." She paused. "I should warn you, this may get more complicated before it gets resolved. Family financial. Fraud cases often do." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. The detective's words echoed in my mind, more complicated. As if this tangled web of betrayal, this systematic exploitation of trust and relationship, wasn't already complex enough. But perhaps that was the nature of healing from betrayal. Accepting that the path forward wouldn't be straightforward or easy. That there would be unexpected turns, painful revelations, difficult decisions. And yet, for the first time since that mortgage notification had appeared on my phone, I felt something, like hope. Not that everything would be magically resolved, not that relationships could be instantly repaired, not that trust could be immediately restored, but hope that truth would prevail, that justice would be served, that my life, my real life, not the fraudulent version created in my name, would continue on my terms. I opened my journal again and wrote, "The worst thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. It comes from those you thought you could trust. But the best thing about surviving betrayal is discovering that you are stronger than the bonds that were broken." As I closed the journal, my phone chimed with a text from Vivian. "Meeting with the prosecutor tomorrow. Your sister's house of cards is finally falling down." I looked around my modest apartment, small but honestly mine, paid for with my own hard-earned money, filled with things I'd chosen and purchased legitimately. It might not be a lakeside dream home with luxury appliances and designer furniture, but it was real, authentic, true. And in that moment, I realized that was what Elise had truly stolen from herself. Not just her freedom or reputation or future, but her authenticity. Her chance to build a life based on truth rather than deception, on genuine achievement rather than theft. I couldn't feel sorry for her, not yet, maybe not ever. But I could feel grateful for the painful clarity this experience had brought me. The understanding that my worth wasn't tied to what others thought of me or did to me. That my identity wasn't defined by accounts or assets or credit scores, but by integrity and resilience and truth. My sister had stolen my identity to buy her dream house. The bank had called me. She had lost everything by dawn. But me? I had found something far more valuable than any house, any possession, any external marker of success. I had found myself, the real me, stronger and clearer and more determined than ever before. 3 weeks after discovering the mortgage fraud, I sat in a conference room at the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Division. The walls were lined with evidence boards, timelines, photographs, document copies, all connected with colored strings that mapped the elaborate web of Elise's deceptions. Detective Harmon stood at the front of the room, addressing a team that now included FBI agents, bank investigators, and prosecutors from the district attorney's office. "We've identified 12 separate victims so far," she said, pointing to a row of photographs. My face was there. So was Vivian's. The others were strangers to me, though I'd spoken to several of them by phone in recent days. The total financial impact exceeds $3 million across 37 fraudulent accounts. I tried to absorb the scale of it, 12 lives disrupted, 37 accounts, over $2 million. The numbers seemed abstract, disconnected from the sister I thought I knew, the family dynamics I'd navigated my entire life. Ms. Chen, one of the FBI agents addressed me. We'd like to discuss your parents' involvement. Our financial analysis suggests they received regular payments from accounts opened in your name and others. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You're saying they weren't just emotionally enabling Elise? They were profiting from this? The agent nodded, sliding a document across the table. It was a bank statement for an account in my parents' names, showing monthly deposits ranging from $5,000 to $12,000, all from accounts that had been flagged as fraudulent. We believe they were receiving approximately 15% of all funds obtained through identity theft, the agent continued. Essentially, a commission. My hands trembled as I pushed the statement away. I'd prepared myself for many painful revelations in recent weeks, but this one cut deeper than I'd anticipated. This wasn't just passive enabling or misguided parental loyalty. This was active participation in a criminal enterprise that had victimized me and others. What happens to them? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. They'll face charges, the prosecutor said. Money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, receiving stolen property. The penalties could be substantial, especially given the amounts involved. I nodded, numb. My entire family, facing criminal charges, potential prison time. The reality of it seemed impossible to grasp. After the meeting, I stood in the precinct parking lot, breathing in the cool spring air, trying to ground myself. My phone vibrated with a text from Connor. Just got subpoenaed for your parents' preliminary hearing. You too? I checked my email and found the notification. Yes, I'd been called to testify as well. This was really happening. The family that had shaped me, for better and worse, was being dismantled by the justice system, their crimes laid bare for public scrutiny. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of grief, anger, and a strange sense of liberation. As I drove home, I took a detour past my childhood neighborhood. The modest two-story house where I'd grown up looked smaller than I remembered, the yard less pristine. Yellow crime scene tape stretched across the front door, evidence of the search warrant executed there days earlier. I didn't stop. There was nothing there for me anymore. No comfort, no answers, no resolution. Just memories that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. Someone who hadn't yet discovered the truth about her family. Back at my apartment, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten letter from my father, the first direct communication I'd had with either parent since declining their calls weeks ago. Morgan, it began, I won't ask for forgiveness. What we did is unforgivable, but I want you to understand why. He went on to explain that they'd started helping Elise cover up small financial indiscretions in high school, shoplifting, forged checks, stolen credit cards. Each time they'd convinced themselves it was a one-time lapse, a youthful mistake. They'd paid restitution, smoothed things over, kept it quiet. By the time we realized the pattern wouldn't stop, he wrote, we were already complicit. And then she started including us in the rewards, trips, gifts, cash. We told ourselves it was victimless, just taking from faceless corporations that wouldn't miss the money. Until it wasn't victimless anymore. Until their own daughter became the target. When we found out she was using your information, the letter continued, we should have stopped it. Instead, we rationalized, told ourselves you'd never know, that your credit was strong enough to withstand it, that family loyalty mattered more than abstract financial ethics. The letter ended with no plea for understanding, no request for intercession with the authorities. Just a simple statement. You deserved better parents than we were. I hope someday you find the family you deserve. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the evidence file I'd been maintaining. It wasn't an apology, but it was something perhaps more valuable, an acknowledgement. A confirmation that I hadn't imagined or exaggerated what had happened, that my parents knew exactly what they'd done. That night, I did something I hadn't done since the nightmare began. I called my closest friend Zoe and told her everything. She'd been reaching out for weeks, concerned by my sudden withdrawal, my vague excuses about family issues keeping me busy. "I'm coming over," she said immediately, "with wine, and those ridiculous cream puffs from the French bakery you like." An hour later, we sat on my balcony, the Seattle skyline glittering before us, and I felt a knot inside me begin to loosen. Zoe listened without interruption as I detailed the fraud, the investigation, the impending legal proceedings. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I always thought your family was messed up," she said bluntly, "but this is next-level dysfunction." I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. "That's an understatement." "You know what the worst part is?" she continued. "You spent your whole life thinking you were the problem, that if you were just more accommodating, more forgiving, more willing to go along with their bullshit, you'd finally be a good daughter or a good sister." Her words hit with startling accuracy. I had spent decades contorting myself to fit my family's expectations, always assuming that their disapproval meant I was failing rather than that their standards were warped. "The good news," Zoe said, refilling our glasses, "is that you get to choose your family now. The real kind, people who actually care about your well-being." I sipped my wine, considering her words. I don't know if I trust my judgment anymore. I didn't see any of this coming. "Because you're not a suspicious person by nature," she countered. "That's not a character flaw, Morgan. That's actually a beautiful quality. You expect honesty because you give honesty. You expect care because you give care. And look where it got me. It got you here." She gestured to the apartment around us. "Building a successful career doing work you love. It got you genuine friendships. It got you integrity and self-respect. Those aren't small things." She was right, I realized. Despite growing up in a family where deception was currency, I hadn't adopted their values. I hadn't become someone who exploited others for personal gain. I'd built a life based on honest work and real connections. Maybe that was its own kind of victory. The next morning, I woke to news that sent shockwaves through the already tumultuous landscape of my life. Elise had gone into premature labor, while in custody. Connor had been notified as next of kin and was at the hospital. I stared at his text for a long time, unsure how to respond. This was my niece or nephew being born, my family, despite everything. But the circumstances were so far from the joyful arrival most families celebrate. After careful consideration, I texted back, "I'm here if you need anything." His response came quickly. "Would you come? Not for her, for me, for the baby." I found myself driving to Northwest Hospital, a tight knot of anxiety in my chest. What would I say to Elise if I saw her? What would it feel like to welcome a child into a family fractured by betrayal and legal proceedings? Connor met me in the waiting room, looking exhausted but oddly peaceful. "It's a girl," he said. 5 pounds, 3 ounces. They're monitoring her in the NICU, but the doctors say she's strong." "Congratulations," I said, and meant it. Whatever Elise had done, whatever my parents had enabled, this baby was innocent. "Have you chosen a name?" "Lily," he said. "Lily Morgan Walsh." I blinked, surprised. "Morgan?" The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my closet, deliberating over what to wear. It seemed like such a trivial concern given the circumstances, and yet it mattered. I wanted to present myself as what I was, a professional, competent adult who had been victimized but not defeated. I chose a structured navy dress, classic, serious, dignified. As I fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings, the only family heirlooms I still valued. My phone rang. Detective Harmon. "Ms. Chen," she said when I answered, "I wanted to give you a heads up before you arrive at the courthouse. Your parents have accepted a plea deal." I sat down on the edge of my bed. "What kind of deal?" "In exchange for full cooperation against Elise and several other co-conspirators we've identified, they'll plead guilty to reduced charges. They'll still serve time, probably 3 to 5 years, but less than they would have faced at trial." Part of me felt cheated of the confrontation I'd been preparing for, the opportunity to testify publicly about what they'd done. But another part felt relief that I wouldn't have to relive every painful detail in a courtroom full of strangers. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Elise called from prison yesterday," he said, watching carefully for my reaction. "She's been participating in a restorative justice program. Part of it involves making amends where possible." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "She wants to see you." "Not now," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "The program takes months to complete. She needs to demonstrate genuine change first, work with counselors, prepare properly. But eventually, if you were willing..." I'd expected to feel instant rejection at the idea. Instead, I found myself considering it, not for Elise's sake, but for my own. Perhaps there was value in facing her one more time, not as a victim, but as the person I'd become. "I'll think about it," I said, and meant it. "No promises, but I'll consider it when the time comes." On the drive home, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The acute pain of betrayal had mellowed into something more manageable, a scar rather than an open wound. I could go days without thinking about Elise or my parents, weeks without that sick feeling in my stomach when I remembered what they'd done. I'd rebuilt my credit, established new financial safeguards, created a life that was both more protected and, paradoxically, more open than before. I'd discovered strengths I hadn't known I possessed and developed boundaries I'd never thought to establish. But most importantly, I'd learned to trust again, not blindly or completely, but carefully, selectively, with people who had earned that trust through consistent actions rather than familial obligation. The next day, my offer on the condo was accepted. As I signed the purchase documents, checking and double-checking every clause, a habit I'd developed since the fraud, I felt a profound sense of reclamation. This was mine, achieved through honest work and unfortunate circumstance, but undeniably, legitimately mine. The closing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, I had another significant appointment. My first official session with the therapist I'd been seeing informally since the fraud discovery. Dr. Lin had been recommended by Vivian, who'd found her invaluable in processing her own experience as one of Elise's victims. Initially, I'd resisted the idea of therapy, convinced I could handle the emotional fallout on my own. But as the case progressed and the revelations became more painful, I'd recognized the value of professional support. "You've reached an interesting juncture," Dr. Lin observed after I told her about the condo purchase and the firm's partnership offer. "For months, your focus has been on recovery, rebuilding what was damaged, securing what was vulnerable. Now you're shifting to creation, building something new, making choices about the future you want." I nodded, struck by the accuracy of her observation. "It feels different, less reactive, more intentional." "That's significant progress," she said. "Many people who experience betrayal at the level you have become stuck in a defensive posture, making decisions based primarily on avoiding future pain rather than pursuing what they truly want." "I still have moments of that," I admitted. "Times when I catch myself being suspicious for no reason, or hesitating to trust even when someone has given me no cause to doubt them." "That's normal," Dr. Lin assured me. "Hypervigilance is a natural response to violation. The goal isn't to eliminate it entirely, but to recognize it when it appears and evaluate whether it's serving you in that moment. We spent the rest of the session discussing strategies for balancing reasonable caution with openness to new possibilities. In my career, in my relationships, in my approach to life generally. By the time I left her office, I felt both grounded and expansive, ready for whatever came next. What came next, unexpectedly, was a letter from my father. It arrived at my office rather than my apartment, addressed in handwriting I recognized immediately, despite not having seen it in months. The return address was the minimum security federal prison where he was serving his sentence. I set it aside initially, unsure whether I wanted to open this line of communication. My parents had respected my silence since their sentencing, making no attempts to contact me directly. This change in approach warranted consideration. That evening, sitting on my soon-to-be former balcony with a glass of wine and the city lights spread before me, I finally opened the envelope. "Dear Morgan," my father had written in his precise script, "I won't presume to ask how you are, as I've forfeited the right to such familial inquiries. I write only to inform you that your mother and I have completed the first phase of our rehabilitation program, which includes acknowledging the full extent of harm we've caused." He went on to explain that as part of this process, they had prepared comprehensive accountings of their involvement in Elise's fraud schemes, not just against me, but against all the victims they'd helped her target over the years. "We've provided these statements to the authorities to assist with ongoing investigations and to ensure that anyone harmed by our actions has the opportunity for full restitution. We've also signed legal documents forfeiting any remaining assets or future earnings, until all victims have been compensated to the extent possible." It was a practical letter, focused on actions rather than emotions, facts rather than excuses. There was no plea for forgiveness, no request for response, just information he thought I should have. Only in the final paragraph did he venture into more personal territory. "I cannot undo the damage I've done to you, to our family, to the others who trusted us. I cannot reclaim the title of father in any meaningful sense. But I can commit to living whatever years remain to me with honesty and accountability. That commitment is not offered as amends. Nothing could suffice for that, but as the only constructive path forward I can envision." I read the letter twice, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda and finding none. It seemed to be exactly what it appeared, an update from a man who had accepted the consequences of his actions and was attempting to live within them with some measure of integrity. I didn't feel compelled to respond, but neither did I feel the sharp pain that had accompanied earlier thoughts of my parents. It was as if the letter had somehow granted permission for us all to move forward separately, without the weight of unfinished business or unacknowledged harm. The following week brought more transitions. I accepted the firm's partnership offer with a modified proposal of my own. I would commit to 3 years on the partnership track, with the understanding that I might eventually branch out independently. To my surprise, the senior partners were supportive of this transparency, seeing it as an opportunity for potential future collaboration rather than a threat. I also began preparations for moving to my new condo, sorting through 7 years of accumulated possessions in my apartment and making decisions about what to keep, what to discard, what to donate. It was a physical manifestation of the internal work I'd been doing all year, evaluating what still served me and what I had outgrown. Among the items I considered carefully were the few family photographs I'd kept, pictures of childhood holidays, graduation ceremonies, moments that had seemed happy at the time but now carried complicated associations. I didn't want to erase my history, but I didn't want these reminders prominently displayed in my new home either. Eventually, I decided to create a simple photo album that included a carefully curated selection of family images alongside photographs from my adult life, trips with friends, professional achievements, candid moments of joy with people who genuinely cared for me. This album would live on a bookshelf, available when I wanted to revisit the past, but not imposing itself on my daily experience. The day before my closing, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Vivian, the former supervisor who had become both friend and fellow traveler through the aftermath of Elise's fraud. "I brought a housewarming gift," she said, handing me a small, wrapped package. "Though technically it's premature since you haven't closed yet." I unwrapped it to find a beautiful brass door knocker, simple and elegant, with my initials engraved. At the center. "For your new front door," Vivian explained. "A reminder that you control who enters your space now, literally and figuratively." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved me deeply. "Thank you," I said, running my fingers over the cool metal. "It's perfect." We sat on the balcony with coffee, sharing updates on our lives. Vivian had recently started dating again after divorcing. Her husband of 20 years, a decision catalyzed in part by his dismissive attitude toward the identity theft she'd experienced. "He kept saying I was overreacting," she recalled. "That it was just money, that insurance would cover it, that I shouldn't let it affect me so deeply, as if having your identity stolen by someone you trusted was a minor inconvenience rather than a profound violation." I nodded, understanding completely. People who haven't experienced it can't grasp how it changes your relationship with the world, how it makes you question everything and everyone. Exactly. And I realized I didn't want to be with someone who couldn't or wouldn't understand something that fundamental about my experience. She sipped her coffee. "The funny thing is, now that I'm on the other side of both the fraud and the divorce, I feel more like myself than I have in years. More authentic, more aligned with my own values." "I know what you mean," I said. "There's a clarity that comes from having everything stripped away. You rebuild with intention rather than habit." We talked until the afternoon light began to fade. Two women who had emerged from similar crucibles with newfound strength and perspective. As Vivian prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. "I saw in the case updates that Elise is participating in a restorative justice program," she said. "Have you thought about whether you'll participate if she requests a meeting?" "I'm considering it," I admitted. "Not for her sake, but for my own. To close that chapter completely." Vivian nodded thoughtfully. "I made that choice 6 months ago. Met with her in a supervised setting after she completed the preliminary program requirements." She paused. "It wasn't what I expected." "In what way?" "She was different, humbled. The performative charm was gone. She just seemed exhausted and genuinely remorseful." Vivian shrugged. "I can't say whether it was real transformation or just another performance, but it gave me a kind of closure I needed, allowed me to let go of the anger I'd been carrying." I considered this as I walked Vivian to her car. The possibility that Elise might have changed, might be capable of change, was something I'd been reluctant to entertain. It was simpler to view her as irredeemably manipulative, a person constitutionally incapable of honest connection. But perhaps that perspective said more about my need for a clean narrative than about Elise's capacity for growth. Perhaps there was room for more complexity in this story. The next day, I signed the closing documents on my new condo, officially, becoming a homeowner for the first time. As the real estate agent handed me the keys, I felt a surge of emotion. Pride, relief, excitement, and a touch of bittersweet reflection on the path that had led me here. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "It's all yours." All mine. Two simple words that carried profound meaning after a year of reclaiming what had been taken from me. My identity, my financial security, my trust in my own judgment. I drove directly to the condo, letting myself in with my new keys. The empty rooms echoed with possibility. I walked through each space slowly, mentally placing furniture, imagining morning coffee by the windows, evenings working in the home office. Friends gathered around the dining table. In the main bedroom, I stood before the large window overlooking the lake and skyline. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the hardwood floors. I set down my purse and the small box containing Vivian's door knocker, then pulled out my phone. I had calls to make, to Zoe, to schedule help with moving, to Connor, to confirm our weekend plans with Lily, to my new neighbors, who had invited me for welcome drinks. Connections I had chosen, relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation or manipulation. But first, I took a moment to simply be present in this space that was wholly mine, achieved through my own resilience and determination. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, trusting to a fault, uncertain of my boundaries, defined in many ways by my family's expectations and narratives. That woman was gone, transformed by betrayal and its aftermath, into someone stronger, clearer, more intentional in her choices. Someone who understood that true family wasn't defined by blood, but by consistent love and respect. Someone who knew her own worth wasn't dependent on others' validation or approval. As I dialed Zoe's number, I caught my reflection in the window. Glass, straight-backed, eyes clear, expression serene. I barely recognized myself, yet I had never felt more authentically me. "Hey," Zoe answered. "Did you get the keys? Is it official?" "It's official," I confirmed. "I'm home." 3 months after moving into my condo, I received an official letter from the Restorative Justice Program at the Federal Women's Prison, where Elise was serving her sentence. She had completed the preliminary phases of the program and was requesting a facilitated meeting with me as part of her amends process. I sat with the letter for several days, discussing it with Dr. Lynn in our weekly session, seeking advice from Vivian about her own experience, reflecting on what I hoped to gain or resolve through such a meeting. In the end, I decided to participate, not for Elise's rehabilitation, but for my own sense of completion. I wanted to face her not as a victim, but as an equal, to speak my truth without anger or defensiveness clouding the message. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in late autumn. I chose my outfit carefully, a charcoal gray suit that conveyed professionalism and strength, accessorized with a silver pendant Zoe had given me on my birthday. Armor of a sort, but subtle, dignified. The prison visiting area was sparse, but clean, with several small tables arranged for private conversations. A counselor from the Restorative Justice Program met me at the entrance, explaining the process and boundaries for our facilitated discussion. "You can end the meeting at any time," she assured me. "This is about your healing as much as your sister's rehabilitation." When Elise was brought in, I was struck by how different she looked from the polished, confident woman I remembered. Her prison uniform hung loosely on a frame that had grown thinner. Her hair, once expertly colored and styled, was pulled back simply, showing strands of premature gray. The performative charm that had been her hallmark was absent, replaced by a wary humility. "Morgan," she said softly as she sat across from me. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, maintaining eye contact but offering nothing more. The counselor guided us through an initial centering exercise, then invited Elise to share what she had prepared. "I've spent the past year trying to understand why I did what I did," Elise began. "Not to excuse it, but to make sure I never repeat those patterns." She paused, gathering herself. "What I've realized is that I've been living with a profound emptiness for as long as I can remember. Nothing external ever filled it. Not success, not possessions, not even Lily." She described working with prison therapists to uncover the roots of her behavior, a pathological need for external validation combined with an inability to form genuine emotional connections. "I saw other people as instruments, not individuals," she admitted. "Sources of whatever I needed at the moment: money, status, identity, security. You most of all, Morgan. You were the reliable one, the successful one, the one with integrity. I both envied and resented those qualities, so I exploited them. Her candor was unexpected. There was no hint of the manipulative tactics she'd once employed so effortlessly. No tears, no appeals to family loyalty, no minimizing of her actions. "I know there's no making this right," she continued. "The harm I caused you and others can't be undone. But I want you to know that I recognize it fully. I make no excuses, and I am committed to never causing such harm again, whether I'm eventually released or remain incarcerated for my full sentence." When she finished speaking, the counselor turned to me. "Would you like to respond, Morgan?" I had prepared for this moment, rehearsing what I wanted to say. "Thank you for your honesty, Elise. I appreciate that you're taking responsibility for your actions without qualification." I paused, organizing my thoughts. For most of my life, I believed something was wrong with me because I couldn't make our family dynamics work. I thought if I was just more understanding, more forgiving, more willing to accommodate, we could have the kind of relationship sisters are supposed to have. Elise's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't interrupt. "What I've learned through this experience is that relationships, real, healthy relationships, require mutual respect, honesty, and care. They can't be sustained when one person is continually exploited while the other takes without giving." I leaned forward slightly. "I don't hate you, Elise. I don't wish you suffering. But I don't trust you, and I don't know if I ever will again. What I do know is that I'm committed to being present in Lily's life, to helping her grow into someone who understands the value of integrity and genuine connection." The meeting continued for another hour, both of us speaking openly about our experiences, the counselor guiding us toward understanding rather than accusation or defense. By the end, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a release from the active pain and anger I'd carried. As I prepared to leave, Elise asked one final question. "Do you think people can change, really change, at a fundamental level?" I considered carefully before answering. I think people can learn. They can develop awareness of their patterns and make different choices. They can build new neural pathways, new habits, new ways of engaging with the world. I met her gaze directly. Whether that constitutes fundamental change, I don't know. But I believe in the possibility of becoming better than we've been. It was the most honest answer I could give. Neither false hope nor cynical dismissal, but an acknowledgement of the complexity of human growth and the uncertainty of its limits. As I drove home from the prison, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The meeting hadn't erased what Elise had done or magically restored trust between us. But it had helped me integrate this chapter of my life into a larger narrative, one in which betrayal was an event that had shaped me but no longer defined me. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party in my new home. Zoe and her partner, Connor and Lily, Vivian and her new boyfriend, 2 colleagues from the architecture firm. As we gathered around my dining table, sharing food and conversation, I looked at the faces of these people who had become my chosen family. They had seen me at my most vulnerable, angry, hurt, confused, afraid, and had offered not judgment but support. They had respected my boundaries, celebrated my victories, accompanied me through the dark valleys of recovery and the uncertain terrain of rebuilding. Later, after the guests had gone and I'd tucked a sleepy Lily into the small bed I'd set up, in the spare room for her occasional overnight stays, I stepped out onto my terrace. The lights of Seattle sparkled across the water, a constellation of human presence in the darkness. I thought about the journey of the past year, from the shock of betrayal to the painstaking process of reclamation, to this moment of quiet contentment in a life that was authentically mine. My sister had stolen my identity to buy her dream house. The bank had called me. She had lost everything by dawn. But I had gained something precious beyond measure: The knowledge that my worth wasn't tied to others' treatment of me, that my capacity for trust wasn't destroyed by betrayal, that my future wasn't limited by my past. I had discovered that family could be chosen rather than merely inherited, that boundaries could be protective rather than isolating, that vulnerability could coexist with strength. I had learned that the most valuable possessions weren't houses, or cars, or designer goods, but integrity, authenticity, and the courage to live in alignment with one's deepest values. As I turned to go inside, to my home, my sanctuary, my new beginning, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for what had happened, but for who I had become because of it. Stronger, wiser, more compassionate toward others and toward myself. I closed the terrace door, locking it securely before turning out the lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new choices to make. But tonight, in this moment, I was at peace. With my past, with my present, and with whatever the future might hold. My identity was mine alone, not something that could be stolen or forged or manipulated, but the essential core of who I was, and who I was becoming. And that, I now knew with absolute certainty, was more than enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.